Okay, good morning, folks. We are going to get started here. I could call this room to order. I'm standing in front of you here. Welcome, everybody, to the Pacific Coast Collaborative session on reducing food waste 50% by 2030. We have an esteemed panel of leaders, both from the Pacific Coast of North America and from here in the UK as well, and the World Wildlife Fund. So I'll introduce our speakers momentarily. My name is Gregor Robertson. I am the former mayor of Vancouver, BC, Canada, and currently helping the PCC as an ambassador. And I will be kind of moderating things here, keeping everyone on track. We've got a lot to pack in today because we've had great results on the west coast of North America dealing with food waste, and lots of good stories to share on that front. So the Pacific Coast Collaborative is a collaborative of subnational governments on the Pacific Coast: California, Oregon, Washington, and the province of BC, British Columbia, and Canada, and the 6 major cities along the west coast: Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles. So the states and BC started the collaborative 2008, 2009. The cities joined about 5 years ago. I had the honor of being part of that addition to the PCC. And the food waste initiative launched in 2018 at the Climate Action Summit in San Francisco. So it's been several years now of gearing up across the region. And we benefited greatly from having the leadership of the UK, who we're going to hear from here today. They led the charge in terms of reducing food waste dramatically and critically reducing climate emissions related to food waste. This rolls up to climate, but it connects the dots between local agriculture, more sustainable food systems, as well as reducing, obviously, waste to landfill waste that inevitably turns into methane and other greenhouse gases and cranks up our climate impacts. So reducing food waste is critically important, and there's also an element of this that gets that food to the people who need it the most, and that is another piece we'll touch on today. So we are going to also talk about the partnership with the private sector, which has been really critical both in the UK, I know, and certainly in terms of how we've done this on the Pacific Coast of North America. We've had great partnerships with major food retailers and processors as well that has enabled us to make much bigger gains, much more progress than we would have just as government bodies. So that collaboration is really at the core of what PCC is, bringing public and private sectors together, working at a community level, and making sure we see the impact. So I'd like to introduce today's panelists who are going to be discussing and the PCC's work and other work around the world as well, just for a sense of perspective. And first I'll welcome Governor Kate Brown, the state of Oregon, who is here, Jen Hennessy from Washington State, who is a senior policy advisor for environment, water, and ocean health in the office of Governor Jay Inslee. As well, we have Shireen D'Souza, California's deputy secretary for climate policy and intergovernmental relations. We have Marcine Mitchell from the World Wildlife Fund, who've been the lead NGO partner on a food waste initiative all over the world, as expected. And we have Dr. Richard Swanell, who is the international director of RAP here in the UK, and Jane Ewing, who's the senior VP of sustainability at Wal Mart. So welcome to you all, and thank you for making the time to be here and share stories from the West Coast and around the world. So we're going to start with Governor Brown in Oregon, who's been a huge proponent of the food waste, reducing food waste and the impacts that it has, as well as climate change in general, and the tie to reducing climate pollution. And we'll let Governor Brown get us started with perspective from Oregon, from the front lines. Governor Brown.
Thank you so much, and I'm so honored to be sharing the stage with my esteemed colleagues today. I'm really excited about the work that's happening in Oregon, as well as the collaborative effort through the PCC. Oregon is feeling the impacts of climate change. Incredibly, this past year, we have had 3 dramatic events, freak events, that are pushing us to move further and faster as quickly as we can in terms of tackling climate change. In February, we had an unprecedented ice storm, losing power to over 1 million Oregonians for over a week. Later in the summer, we had a heat dome event, 3 days of 116-degree temperatures in Portland, Oregon, 46 degrees Celsius. We lost over 90 Oregonians. And then we have continued to have wildfires. This year's wildfire, the Bootleg Fire, created so much smoke. They felt it on the East Coast in New York. And it literally created its own weather patterns. So I'm really pleased to see the work that we are doing around reducing food waste. In Portland, Oregon, our major city, it started over a decade ago. And the best way I can describe it is we began composting, but the city did it very carefully. They sent out bins. The compost bin was the large bin, including food compost, but it also included leaves. But they gave Portlanders a very small trash bin. And it sent a very strong message that we have to reduce, reuse, and recycle. A very strong message. So we are working hard to reduce food waste because we believe we have an environmental imperative. Obviously, by reducing food waste because of emissions through the transport, delivery of food, but also, frankly, emissions at the landfills. So it's incredibly important from an environmental perspective. It's also incredibly important from an economic perspective that we do this work. The joy of Oregon is that we are a very diverse state geographically, but we also produce over 220 commodities. And we were, I think, the heart of the farm-to-table movement and are very, very proud of the work we are doing to make sure that our locally grown sustainable produce ends up either on restaurant tables or in Oregonians' kitchens. And we want to make sure that we continue that very important economic connection. But the third piece is for Oregon, and I think for states across the country, we have so many families, so many children that don't get adequate food and adequate nutrition. So it's so important that the food go to the right places and not be wasted, causing more climate challenges. So we are very, very pleased to be part of the PCC, this collaborative, productive process, and very excited to see the process that's happening so far and the progress being made.
Thanks, Governor Brown. And thanks for all your leadership at the state level on that front. We're going to shift over to the World Wildlife Fund. And Vice President Marcine Mitchell, would you just tell us why food waste has become such an important priority for WWF?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So we all know that in order to maintain temperatures at 1.5 degrees, that we all need to reach net zero by 2050. That's all sectors, and that includes the food sector as well. So to do that, one group is not going to be able to do that alone. We really need to come together. And so at WWF, we are really part of convening and being part of collaborations where we're bringing all the different players together to address an issue. And the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment is one of those type of efforts. So it's important for us to come together in order to address this issue. And what is the issue? So in the United States, 35% of food goes either unsold or uneaten. And that results in 80.6 million tons of surplus food each year, about 56 million of which is food waste. And so food that's grown but never eaten or consumed has an enormous impact on nature and on climate. It consumes 14% of all of our fresh water, 18% of our cropland, and 24% of our landfill goes to this surplus food waste. And all of this uneaten food also contributes about 8 to 10% of global GHG emissions. So that's a huge chunk of GHG emissions going just to food waste. So the PCFWC is a voluntary agreement between the food business and these regional jurisdiction partners in order to reduce and prevent wasted food in the Pacific region, with an objective of reaching 50% reduction by 2030, and that's aligned with science. Very, very important. It offers its food waste signatories, business signatories, the opportunity to participate in working groups. And this is really critical. These are pre-competitive groups. So working with other businesses, working with the regions in a pre-competitive situation where you can share information, share data, problem solve, and come up with solutions and use and share best practices. So that's a really important way to bringing in businesses. It also allows signatories to participate in pilot projects, working with food waste technicians and consultants to focus on specific problem areas within their operations. And then the results from these efforts can be publicly shared to inform others. So it can start here in the Pacific coast areas, but hopefully this type of best practice, this type of data, this type of information sharing can then be established around the country. And this is a really important part. The data sharing is an important part of the process in order to grow and to really make impact. So all of these things add up to why WWF finds this is really an important thing as we try to tackle the climate crisis. So thank you.
Thank you. And wonderful. Thanks for your leadership. Next, we're going to hear from the state of Washington. And Jen Hennessy, you have the mic.
We have to share the mic, so that's okay. Well, as has already been illustrated by the previous speakers, food waste is really a waste of resources, and it's contributing to climate change. In Washington, food waste is actually the largest single component of our solid waste going to landfills. So that's a huge opportunity, and it's a huge waste right now. So we really need to do more to prevent that food from going to the landfill, reducing the waste in the first place, making sure that we rescue that food and get it to people who are hungry. Like Oregon, Washington has a quarter of our citizens who are food insecure. That's 2 million Washingtonians that could be getting food. And so we need to rescue that food and get it to the people who need it. And then we need to recover. We need to do more to make sure that we're doing composting more. We do have cities like Seattle and Tacoma that have organic composting operations, but it's not in every city in our state. And so we can do more to really make sure that we're reducing that carbon footprint, reducing methane emissions at our landfills, and making sure that we're using that as a resource. So, thank you.
Thank you. And next, we're going to hear from California and Deputy Secretary Shireen, would you tell us, you just recently passed Bill 1383, I think, that focused targeting short-term pollutants, such as those coming from wasted food. So obviously you're taking legislative action. Can you give us a broader perspective on the California state of affairs?
Yeah, thanks so much, Gregor. And can you hear me? Yeah, great. It is such an honor to be here with the rest of the panelists. And before I dive in, I just want to say we see the Pacific Coast Collaborative as such an incredibly important forum for sharing our experiences, learning from each other, and creating a race to the top in addressing our common climate challenges. So really appreciate the PCC for bringing us together here. And for California, just like the governor said, we're seeing the impacts of climate change that we were expecting decades from now. We're in the worst drought of 1,000 years. Millions of acres burning every single year. And then just 2 weeks ago, we had this atmospheric river bomb cyclone that brought us as much rain in a 2-day event than California saw in all of last year combined. So for us, for Governor Newsom, addressing both the impacts of climate change through adaptation and reducing the drivers like methane is an incredibly important priority. For us, reducing our methane emissions, addressing the food waste issue is principally an issue of equity and justice. And this is for two reasons. One is because we see climate change, we all know that climate change hits low-income communities, communities of color first and worst, right? So reducing our methane emissions is a direct way for us to address the impacts that are hitting our disadvantaged communities first, right? Additionally, just like Jennifer said a minute ago, a quarter of California's population is food insecure. So poverty in California is a huge issue that manifests as homelessness, food insecurity, and using this opportunity to essentially feed two birds with one seed through reducing our methane emissions by diverting waste organic waste that would go to landfills and recovering a portion of it as much as possible and sending it to food insecure households is what we're trying to do through SB 1383, the short-lived climate pollutants bill. And so through 1383, we have a few targets. One is to divert organic waste from landfills. Currently, at the time of the passage, it was about 50%, 50, of the waste that was going to landfills. So to divert 50% of that in 2020 and 75% of it in 2025, and we're well on our way to making that happen. Another target in SB 1383 is to recover edible food that would be considered organic waste and send it to food recovery organizations so food insecure Californians can have access to it. And in order to achieve these targets, next year, 2022, all jurisdictions will be required to provide organic waste collection services to all businesses and households and ensure that that organic waste that is collected is then used for renewable purposes, such as generating compost and mulch or biogas through anaerobic digestion. And then as that stockpile of organic waste develops, jurisdictions will be required to make use of it through municipal composting or mulching of public lands or use of renewable energy that is generated through anaerobic digestion. So that's what we're doing. We're so excited to be able to share our experiences, learn from what the rest of the rest of the PCC members are doing and address this common challenge. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And really impressive to hear from the three states and the progress that they've made and the commitment, the level of commitment that they've made to reducing food waste and connecting the dots across the spectrum. I just want to bring in the partnership side of this, in particular, starting with the private sector and talking about what Wal Mart is doing. And Deputy Secretary D'Souza said, sharing what we've learned as we go. Wal Mart's taking the, I think, fairly unprecedented step of sharing a lot of the data that you're collecting around this food waste initiative, which may not be that typical in the private sector in a competitive landscape. Can you tell us about why Wal Mart is being such a strong partner on this program?
Yes, of course. Thank you, and hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to just say thank you to the leadership of the states for really pushing this agenda. I think that combination of public and private is going to make the biggest difference, and we really value your leadership, so thank you very much indeed. Walmart's been on a journey since 2005, actually, on sustainability, and waste has been a big part of that. Actually, last year, we upped that commitment to becoming a regenerative company. And we have some big ambitious goals in climate, in nature, in waste, and in people. And as Marcin explained, they're all inextricably linked. But food waste is such a key part of that. And we've made some really good progress that we're proud of. But the partnership here, and that's why we're so excited to be part of this partnership, is going to help us to go to that next level. So we're excited to be part of this. Sharing and having visibility to that data is going to help all of us make the right decisions all the way back from farm all the way through to the supply chain. So we've got initiatives along the way. First of all, let's make sure we have really good forecasting and improve our forecasting so we don't have too much product going into the stores. And then when we're in the stores and if things aren't selling, let's make sure we mark them down and sell them quickly so they get to the customers. Then the next phase is what we don't sell, quickly getting it to the food banks. And we have a good program in all of the states. For most of you, I think you know we're a fairly large retailer, so we have presence in all of these states and also in Canada. So we're really thrilled to partner. We have a lot going to food banks. And then what can't go to food banks, how do we make sure that gets turned into useful bioproducts through anaerobic digestion or anything like that? So we've got our waste to, we've managed to divert 80% of waste from landfills, so we've still a way to go, and we hope with this partnership we'll get all the way there to zero waste. So thank you very much for allowing us to be part of it.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ewing, thank you for your partnership, and we're going to hear the broader perspective from the leaders in this space who we were able to piggyback on to get the Pacific Coast Food Waste Initiative launched and functioning, and that happened here in the UK, and we're honored to have Dr. Swanell here, who, as I mentioned previously, this project is based upon the work that began here in the UK, and it'd be great to hear an update on how your work is scaling globally, both how it's progressed here in the UK and how else it's progressing around the world.
Thank you, Gregor, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you today, and thank you for all of your hard efforts in working on this, both states and also at business level. This is the essence of the public-private partnership, focusing actually on really delivering measurable change. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Just to give you an idea, so why did RAP, the organisation I work for, start working on food waste? And I guess the answer to that is that for every 2 tons of food that we consume globally, 1 ton is wasted. And as we've heard, that's 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. But that's quite hard to get your head around. So another way of thinking of this is that if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions on the planet. It's a massive issue. And you need the area the size of China to grow the food that we throw away every year. So that's why we wanted to work in this particular area. So what did we decide to do? Well, we got together all the retailers and the governments of the UK together in the Courtauld Gallery in London, and we talked about how we could tackle this. And what came out of that was the Courtauld commitment, the commitment now to halve food loss and waste by 2030. And working with businesses and governments, we came up with an approach that I can summarize as target, measure, act. So what that means, set clear targets. So we have the SDG 12.3, so halving food loss and waste by 2030, that's nice and clear. All the businesses that are part of the voluntary agreement measure the food waste, because if you measure it, you can manage it. And actually operationalizing food waste measurement, in our experience, is the single biggest thing you can do to help businesses reduce food waste. And the third thing is act on those data. Act within your own operations, but also, as you heard from Jane, act with your suppliers and your customers to help actually reduce food waste. So target, measure, act. Now, where do we act? We want to act on the hot spots, i.e. those areas which have the biggest waste. And that's where the working groups are focused in the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment. We want to focus where we can make the biggest impact. And then every year we measure our progress and we report that progress to us, all of our stakeholders and publicly. So how has this approach, what impact has this approach had? Well, to give you an idea, up to 2018, this approach actually helped reduce the food waste in the UK by 27%. That's 1.7 million tonnes per year less food waste, which is worth over $6 billion, to give you an idea. Now, to try and put that into perspective, that 1.7 million tonnes would actually make 4 billion meals here in the UK, which is enough to actually feed everybody in the UK for 3 meals a day for 2 months. So this is a lot of food. And actually, that food would have generated enough greenhouse gas emissions to be equivalent to 2.4 million cars on the road in the UK. So this approach can give a significant impact. And more recently, we reported just a couple of weeks ago on the more recent progress, and businesses actually, by using this model, have actually reduced food waste by another 250,000 tonnes, and they were saving, roughly speaking, about $1.3 million a day through reducing food waste. And the other key thing, as we've already mentioned, is how can we get more of that food that would have gone to waste to those in need? And so that's been a big focus. That donation has been a big focus of this approach. I'm delighted to say that we published some data in September that showed that that had tripled in the UK from just under 30,000 tonnes a year to over 90,000 tonnes a year. And it had increased by 42% in 1 year alone over the last year. So this approach can work and can make a big difference. And delighted that this has become an award-winning approach. It won the Global Partnership of the Year back in 2018. But actually, more importantly, we're now seeing it replicated here on the west coast of the US. Fantastic. Replicated in Mexico, replicated in South Africa, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Norway, in Indonesia, and most recently in Australia. So there is beginning to be a bit of momentum behind this approach. This could help us deliver 12.3, and I think it's a key way we're going to help deliver the targets we're discussing here of actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions, halving them by 2030.
Thank you. So thank you very much, and thanks for blazing the trail on this and being able to. I mean, it makes it a lot easier for governments and business to pick up on ideas that are already working and run with them. So it's fantastic to hear it spreading around the world to different countries when it's such an important global issue. We're going to now hear, we got a couple videos from a few of the business partners. Bob's Red Mill from Oregon, who make all sorts of great local grain products. Sprouts and Rayleigh's, I think those are the 3 videos we have from the front lines of our partners.
How is this helping your business achieve its sustainability goals?
Yeah, we're an employee-owned company, so it's so important to us that we create value and minimize waste for all of our employee owners. We're really led by that tenet, and we're exploring a lot of areas around food waste, from optimizing our shelf life to standardizing labeling, rescuing scrap, and then educating our eaters. So I feel like this coalition can help us in all of those areas. And we know that our food loss, it touches all areas of our value chain. So with all these stakeholders involved with the coalition, including the policymakers at the table, it really is going to help us to effectively build strategies.
Thanks, Julia. Natasha, how is this helping Sprouts, achieve its sustainability goals?
We're getting really powerful insight into which categories of waste that we really need to improve upon in terms of diversion efforts. But then, just the roundtables that we conduct are really helping us to kind of think creatively on solutions on how we can take our already established program one step further. We have a goal to achieve zero waste by 2025. And, when you already have gone so far, you really have to get creative. And sometimes when your teams, especially in the realm of sustainability, are relatively small, it's nice to have this wide group of members that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and engage in conversation around how we can take it to the next level.
Awesome. And Mark, on Rayleigh's side.
Yeah, we look at sustainability as good business. And I think looking at food waste and maximizing opportunities for both sell-through and then food donation, and then obviously the end use, which in our case is sending to a biodigester, all important steps. And the less we send to the biodigester, the better. For us, understanding kind of on a larger scale how we can really incorporate new practices, how we can engage with the regulatory agencies, and how we can engage with each other within the group to look at all those things. It really helped us, I think, raise the level of conversation within Rayleigh's on our food rescue, our food basically waste reduction efforts. So I think it's been helpful to really make this a higher level discussion within our organization.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Okay, got a little echo going on here, but so that's just an example of several of the businesses like Wal Mart that are part of this partnership and the difference that it's making on the ground. Maybe just one speed round of comments from our panel here before we open up for some questions. If you would put food waste in the context, you described in particular from the 3 states how the various programs that are in food waste and why it's a priority. Connect it to your goals to 2030, getting from here to 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. The food waste goal is obviously aligned with that. Can you talk a little bit about where this fits in your set of priorities and how it works towards that larger goal of reductions?
Well, for Washington, we're aligned with the 50% cut in food waste by 2030. And so that, we needed to map out how to get there. And as was mentioned earlier, we are establishing a baseline and measuring our progress to that goal. So data is really important. And then we are, in just the next few weeks, going to be releasing our Use Food Well Washington plan, which really is a comprehensive set of actions that will help us get there. Our state agencies can do more work in terms of permitting organic waste facilities and helping streamline that work. Our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction can do more with schools to help educate kids and help kids reduce waste there. So education and prevention is a huge part of that plan and that roadmap. And then partnerships with industry and business. So I think all of that is going to help us get there. And really having a strategy that drills down to the most impactful recommendations and moving those forward is how we're going to get there. So thanks.
Yes, thanks so much for the question. And I would say ditto to everything that Jennifer said. But in addition, I'll talk a little bit about the dollars that we're putting behind our commitment through SB 1383 to reduce organic waste by 75% in 2025. And we are very lucky in California to have such a strong focus on climate action. In fact, this last budget includes $15 billion for climate mitigation and adaptation. And within that, there's several hundred millions of dollars going to address organic waste through CalRecycle, one of our agencies. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about some of those commitments. One is $24 million for food waste prevention and recycling grants, $72 million for organics recycling infrastructure, several hundreds millions more in low-interest loans for creating organic waste recycling infrastructure, which is, of course, necessary if we want to. You've got to have the infrastructure if we want to actually be able to divert waste from the landfills. And this is a small amount, but it's actually really important. It's about $1.3 million for community composting facilities. So you have a small garden, you want to be able to take your compost or your yard clippings, and you don't want to compost them on site. And so you need to have a community space, which especially for disadvantaged communities, having access to something like that in order to have community composting is incredibly important. And our stakeholders who work in that space have been like, even though it's a small amount of money, it's such an incredible seed to create more of that, to further that movement.
So we're not a big dog like California, so my numbers are substantially smaller, but and we did not pass legislation, but I did it through executive order, signed an executive order requiring our Department of Environmental Quality to meet the guidelines of 50% by 2030. But we did invest $1.5 million in a targeted campaign, partnering with our local community-based organizations and local governments to get the word out. And the communication strategy that we have found incredibly successful, we call it laughingly the Bad Apple campaign. And it's been very effective to communicate to consumers using humor about the importance of reducing food waste. But what we learned through that campaign is how we motivate and incent consumers to prevent and reduce food waste is by cost savings. It's about the almighty dollar. And through that campaign, we've learned that. And so we're continuing to reinforce that message as we work to meet our targets. But for us, again, small state, we are very reliant on our public-private partnerships, our partnerships with our local governments, and our efforts to educate and inform consumers to get the job done.
Thanks, Governor Brown.
Yeah, just really quickly, I mean, as you know, that WWF is I'm sorry, I know you can't hear me, is a global conservation organization. And one of the biggest drivers for deforestation and loss of wildlife is conversion of land for agricultural use. So we're converting our land to agricultural, we're destroying forests. Forests are the ecosystems for animals, for biodiversity, et cetera. So, and at the same time, we're growing from 7 billion people to almost 10 billion people in the next 30 years. So in order to do that, we are really going to have a different relationship with our land and with our ecosystems, which support our life systems here. And so food waste is part of that. Food waste is looking at how we can be, as humans, more gentle on our planet, more cognizant of being efficient, of using our resources well, of not being able just to have a disposable society anymore. So from the WWF point of view, these are all linked together in terms of climate, in terms of nature, in terms of sustainability of our beautiful, beautiful planet, which is our life systems. And if people haven't seen, I just was upstairs at the UN pavilion, which is right here, and upstairs they have a Google map type of thing, and it does a time sync of land being converted over time, and it's shocking. I mean, it really is impactful. So if you have a chance, or even on Google, to check that out and really see how much our land, that we're using over time, and how much that has changed, and how we have to bring back. And so using less, wasting less will mean that we have to convert less, which means that we have more of our planet to sustain us. Thank you.
Dr. Swanell, how many countries will you be in by 2030?
I'd love to have every country by that stage, to be honest. I mean, I think, bluntly, if we are going to halve food loss and waste, we need every country to work on. And it was interesting, actually, Greg, there's some work that the UN did, UNEP did, in terms of food waste around the world that we contributed towards. And what it found is that often people have thought that food waste in the home is really a rich world problem. It's a high income country problem. Actually, it's a global problem. We find it all over the world. And so the average human on the planet throws away more food than the average weight of a human every single year, to give you an idea. So I'd love to have everybody signed up and actually working. And we don't all have to use public-private partnerships. I think it's a great tool. There are multiple ways we can act. The critical thing is we need to act, because food waste is one of those things that if we do, we get very rapid reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a great start to food system transformation.
Thank you. Where will Wal Mart be by 2030?
Well, at zero waste, because we've made that commitment, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get that to happen. This is such an important topic. We could obviously talk for hours, but I just want to come back to one thing we talked about, which is education. Like, typically customers want to do the right thing, but they often don't know how. And frankly, if it's too difficult, they won't do it. So how do we make it easy for customers to do the right thing? And I think we can make vast progress. Like, if in my home, if it's not easy for me to put my food waste somewhere and get it easily collected or disposed, I'm probably just going to put it in the trash and it's going to go to the landfill. So changing that behavior is going to take all of us together to figure out how we do that.
Thank you for that. We have a little bit of time left for any questions, if there are any questions from the audience that are here. Can I have to go roving mic with this one? Okay. Welcome.
Hey, I'm Michael Northrup, and I'm from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund in New York City. And I just, fantastic. I mean, everything you guys are doing is remarkable. It's a bit of a sleeper, but it's a big deal, so nice going. I just wondered about Walmart and what you need from policy to get to net zero by 2030. And I'm wondering what's happening in the corporate space generally, whether there's a rush into it by others, and maybe what we need to do to encourage more to get in.
That's a wonderful question, and I wish we had all day to answer it. So we made a commitment last year to be zero emissions by 2040 in our own operations. And that's actually zero, not net zero. So that means a lot of hard work to get that done. And we kind of look at it in 4 key areas within climate specifically. And that is transportation, and you know we can already see a path for the short haul, you know, cars and trucks and delivery vehicles. But what about the big trucks that go, lorries we call them when we're from the UK, from one side of the country to another? They don't exist, and the charging infrastructure doesn't exist yet. So that's a big piece of how can policy move us there. Renewable energy is obviously a huge piece of that pie, so anything that can help accelerate that transition to renewables. Another big one for us is refrigeration. So for grocery stores, and I saw some other grocery partners in this collaborative, you know, today most refrigeration is not particularly climate friendly. So how do we make that transition? It's extremely expensive today. So how do we move that one on? And then waste in general, like some of the things we've talked about today, how we engage customers, how we make the systems work to allow for reduced food waste. And then finally, I would say, you know, plastic and packaging reduction and circularity. Some of the work that's happening on EPR and things like that are going to help move that agenda. We've made big commitments on reducing virgin plastic. But we know we've got a long way to go, and if we do that unilaterally, it can be very hard, whereas if policy is a tailwind versus a headwind, we can move faster and lean in more heavily. And I think the last thing I would say is just, you know, we have, you know, as Walmart, we have, you know, tens of thousands of suppliers, so many of the big and small companies, and we encourage them through a platform called Project Gigaton to join us on that journey. So we want to democratize access to all of these initiatives so everyone can come on this journey with us. It can't just be for the big guys.
More questions? Okay, one more here.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit of a pile-on to that, but it is talking around the theme of regionalization. So we've been hearing the 3 states plus BC are here in this Pacific Coast Collaborative working together. I'm curious on a topic like food waste, particularly, you know, from Walmart and all the retailers that have stores across, you know, a larger geographic area than just a jurisdiction. I'd be curious to hear from Walmart, from RAP's experience, you know, what's the utility of that regional kind of going at this type of working group type of policy approach together? And then, you know, from the states, to the extent that you want to comment on how that's been a useful way to approach something so big and so nuanced like a big supply chain around food retail.
Should I start and pass it to you? You know, we are a huge retailer, and sometimes things that are solvable nationally is helpful. But frankly, we see ourselves as a member of 11,000 communities around the world. So whatever we need to do to be a part of those communities and help those communities. And it was mentioned earlier about making sure we do this in with equality and equity to all of the, particularly the underserved communities. So, you know, we will lean in wherever we can, and where there are willing partners, we've got resources on the ground to help support what needs to be done at the local level.
And thank you. Yeah, and I think this is a very interesting question. It's almost what is the best scale? And of course, the interesting thing about this particular commitment, the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, is it's probably larger than the Kyoto Commitment in the UK in terms of population and in terms of size. So that it seems like a reasonable level to go in at. Mostly we work at national level, largely because supply chains are set up at that level. But that doesn't mean to say it's the only way that it can happen. The critical thing is you look into a particular country and say, what do you think the best way of doing this is, and then orientate it around that. So when we help others, what we always do is work through local partners so that we can understand the conditions and try and make sure that what is done is calibrated very clearly, aligned with the local circumstances.
I'll just pop in here as well. With the states, what I think is so key is that we are truly the laboratories, right? I used to say the petri dishes of public policy, of progressive public policy. We can move further and faster with more flexibility than the federal government in the United States. We can easily replicate best practices and learn from trial and error mistakes. And having the PCC allows us to share, replicate, and learn from one another in ways that are extraordinarily valuable. She mentioned removal of farmland. Oregon was the first state in the country in 1971 that passed a land use planning law, setting aside farmland and forest land for preservation in the future. What that enables us to do now is to innovate around food production. One example, great example, is wine production, that we would not had our south-facing slopes, but for land use planning. And on those south-facing slopes, we are growing the world's best Pinot Noir, or the grapes to create the world's best Pinot Noir. So that is why it's so important through these collaboratives that we work together and learn from one another. But we have to take this to the next level with a sense of urgency around climate change. Future generations will judge us not on the fact of climate change, but what we do to tackle it. And it's so key to have this COP where we can learn, develop relationships, and mentor one another, because we have got to move further and faster. We just have to. No other choice.
Well, I was going to add a few remarks, but the governor said it so well. Really, we do much better. We are more efficient with our time when we're able to share these lessons. We can just pick up those great best practices from each other and put together our plans and start implementing them much quicker. And I think that efficiency will help us move so much quicker with urgency. And that's really what we're feeling on the West Coast, is the moment is urgent. We had this heat dome event. We lost Washingtonians as well. We lost shellfish cooked on the beach. Millions. So it's alarming what's happening, and we really need to act with urgency. So we're really appreciative of this particular initiative, but so many others that we're doing to make sure that we meet the moment. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are at our time, so I will just thank all of our panelists for being here to represent your organizations, your states, the good work that you're doing in partnership together, and all of you for being here to tune in and learn and connect. If there's anything that we can share with you, Meredith and myself are here from the PCC, happy to share more information. We're always keen to share information with other regions. We've organized as a region on the west coast of North America. We've learned a lot from this. We've had leadership through many jurisdictions and many different administrations. Political change has happened at all levels as well. So, and this is still going strong, stronger than ever. So it shows the importance of organizing at a regional level, and we're happy to share our lessons learned with any other regions that are interested. So again, a huge thanks for all of your leadership and all of you. Here's Godspeed to climate action urgently going forward.